You've been told that owning a home in Canada requires six figures, family money, or a lifetime mortgage attached to $1 million shoebox. Headlines celebrate rising prices while ignoring that down payments now cost more than annual salaries. According to the housing narrative, permanent renting is your destiny. But that story quietly skips a detail. Not all of Canada is priced for investors. In this video, we reveal 12 Canadian towns where houses sell for prices that look fake by urban standards, so low you'll assume there's a catch. There isn't. The scam is thinking affordable homes no longer exist. Hit subscribe and let's start. Number 12, Flintflon, Manitoba, northern mining town with houses under $80,000. Flintflon sits on Manitoba-Saskatchewan border with about 5,000 people. Mining heritage creating boom-bust economic cycles, and housing market so depressed that detached houses sell for $45,000 to $85,000, according to recent MLS listings, which is literally what urban Canadians pay for 3 months rent in cities where one-bedroom apartments command $2,000 monthly and parking spots sell for $40,000 as investment assets appreciating faster than actual homes in communities where speculation divorced prices from any relationship to local incomes or economic fundamentals. According to real estate data from late 2025 and early 2026, typical 3-bedroom detached house in Flintflon lists for $60,000 to $75,000, meaning someone with $15,000 down payment and conventional mortgage at current rates would have monthly payments around $400 to $500, which is substantially less than renting equivalent space in any Canadian city and creates path to home ownership that expensive markets made impossible for people earning normal wages without access to family wealth or dual tech incomes. The reason for extreme affordability is a combination of factors including northern Manitoba location, creating isolation and harsh climate that many Canadians consider undesirable, mining industry volatility creating economic uncertainty, affecting employment stability and population retention, and general perception that Flintflon is declining community rather than growing destination, creating negative sentiment that depresses demand and keeps prices at levels reflecting local economic reality rather than speculation-driven insanity affecting southern markets. The houses themselves are typically older construction from mid-20th century mining boom, when company housing and worker residences were built quickly using materials and methods appropriate to era, meaning properties often require updating and maintenance that's been deferred because low values don't justify major renovations, when spending $20,000 on improvements doesn't increase property value proportionally. But structures are generally sound and livable for people accepting that affordable housing means doing own repairs rather than expecting turnkey perfection. According to residents and real estate agents serving Flintflon market, properties can sit for sale for months or years without generating offers despite prices that seem impossibly low to outsiders, because local market is limited to people whose employment requires being in Flintflon or who specifically choose northern Manitoba living, creating buyer pool that's small and selective rather than competitive environment where multiple offers and bidding wars characterize transactions in expensive markets. The property taxes are reasonable, ranging from $1,200 to $2,500 annually for typical residential properties, meaning total housing costs including mortgage, taxes, insurance, and utilities remain under $1,000 monthly, which is a fraction of what renting equivalent space costs in cities where landlords extract maximum revenue from tenants who lack alternatives and face markets where vacancy rates below 1% create conditions allowing exploitation. Number 11, Kapuskasing, Ontario, northern Ontario forestry town with houses under $100,000. Kapuskasing sits in northeastern Ontario with about 8,000 people, bilingual French-English culture, forestry heritage, and housing market where detached houses sell for $55,000 to $110,000 according to recent listings, creating affordability that seems fictional to southern Ontario residents accustomed to paying $700,000 for townhouses or $900,000 for detached homes in suburbs requiring 2-hour commutes to Toronto employment. According to real estate data, typical 3-bedroom house in Kapuskasing lists for $70,000 to $90,000, meaning mortgage payments are $350 to $500 monthly, depending on down payment and interest rates, which is less than what urban Canadians pay weekly for basement rooms in houses with multiple roommates and shared bathrooms requiring negotiation schedules, because overcrowding is normalized response to housing costs that wage stagnation made unaffordable for individuals earning median incomes. The affordability reflects northern Ontario location creating cold climate with winter temperatures regularly hitting -40, isolation from major urban centers with Toronto being 8 hours away and nearest cities being significantly smaller, forestry industry decline eliminating middle-class employment that once supported community, and general demographic challenges where younger generation leaves for opportunities elsewhere creating aging population and declining tax base that affects services and community vibrancy. The houses are a mix of older construction from forestry boom periods and some newer builds. With quality varying but many properties being fundamentally sound structures requiring cosmetic updating or maintenance that's been deferred because low values don't incentivize major renovations, when spending $15,000 on improvements doesn't increase resale value enough to justify investment beyond maintaining basic habitability. According to local real estate agents, properties frequently sell below asking prices because demand is limited and sellers often accept offers that are 10 to 20% below list prices just to complete transactions and exit market, creating opportunities for buyers to negotiate aggressively and acquire properties at prices that urban markets haven't seen in decades when homeownership was achievable on single income without requiring decades of debt. The property taxes are moderate, ranging from $1,500 to $3,000 annually for typical properties, and utility costs for heating are elevated during long winters, but manageable for people whose total housing costs remain well under $1,000 monthly, even when accounting for all expenses that homeownership requires, including maintenance and repairs, that rental properties hide from tenants who see only monthly rent without understanding total costs. Number 10. Uranium City, Saskatchewan, abandoned mining town, with houses under $10,000. Uranium City sits in northwestern Saskatchewan with population collapsed from 2,500 during 1950s uranium boom to approximately 70 current residents, creating ghost town where abandoned houses literally sell for $5,000 to $15,000 or are sometimes given away free to anyone willing to occupy them and pay property taxes, representing most extreme example of housing affordability in Canada, where properties have essentially zero market value because demand doesn't exist. According to sparse real estate listings and community information, houses that were built during uranium boom for mining families now sit empty and deteriorating, with occasional sales occurring at prices ranging from free to $10,000 depending on condition and seller motivation, creating situations where Canadians spending $2,000 monthly for Vancouver basement suites could instead own properties outright in Uranium City for cost of few months. Rent, though extreme isolation and radioactive contamination make ownership questionable decision. The reason for non-existent prices is catastrophic population collapse following mine closure in 1982, when essentially entire population evacuated within months as employment disappeared, combined with extreme northwestern Saskatchewan isolation, accessible only by air or seasonal ice roads, radioactive contamination from decades of uranium mining, creating health concerns that limit who's willing to live there, and general infrastructure decay as services were withdrawn and buildings were abandoned, creating post-apocalyptic landscape. The houses themselves are mid-century construction built quickly during boom, using materials and methods appropriate to era. And decades of abandonment mean many structures have significant deterioration from weather exposure and lack of maintenance, requiring substantial repairs and remediation before being habitable even by minimal standards. Though some properties that remaining residents occupy demonstrate that habitation is possible for people accepting harsh conditions. According to the handful of people who remain in Uranium City or have purchased properties there, primary motivations are extreme isolation providing independence from society, rock-bottom prices allowing ownership with almost no capital, and general freedom from oversight because Saskatchewan provincial government has essentially abandoned community beyond maintaining minimal property records, creating environment where building codes and regulations exist on paper, but enforcement is zero. The property taxes are minimal, often in hundreds rather than thousands of dollars annually, and enforcement is essentially non-existent because provincial government recognizes pursuing collection costs more than revenue generated, and seizing properties in abandoned towns serves no purpose, creating situation where people simply don't pay taxes without facing meaningful consequences because government lacks will and capacity to enforce collection. Number 9. Minto, Manitoba, prairie village with houses under $60,000. Minto sits in southwestern Manitoba with about 900 people, agricultural economy, and housing market where detached houses sell for $35,000 to $65,000 according to recent listings, creating affordability that allows home ownership with savings equivalent to what urban Canadians spend on annual rent, or what down payment represents in expensive markets where 20% of purchase price requires $150,000 in cash. According to real estate data, typical 2 or 3 bedroom house in Minto lists for $45,000 to $55,000, meaning mortgage payments with reasonable down payment are $250 to $350 monthly, which is less than what storage lockers rent for in Vancouver and a fraction of what any form of housing costs in cities where studios approach $2,000 monthly and 1 bedrooms exceed $2,500, creating rental markets where working people spend 60% of income on shelter alone. The affordability reflects southwestern Manitoba location, creating isolation from major centers, with Winnipeg being 2 hours away, small population limiting employment and services, prairie climate with harsh winters dropping to -30 regularly, and summers that are hot and occasionally stormy, and general rural decline affecting small Manitoba communities as younger generation migrates to cities seeking opportunities that agricultural economy no longer provides. The houses are typically older construction from early to mid-20th century, when Minto was more prosperous agricultural service center, with quality varying, but many properties being sound structures that have been maintained adequately by owners who lacked resources for major updates, but kept buildings habitable, creating housing stock that's dated aesthetically, but functionally adequate for people accepting that affordable housing means embracing vintage character rather than expecting modern finishes. According to local real estate dynamics, properties can sit for sale extended periods because buyer pool is limited to people with reasons for living in Minto rather than general market where people compete for available properties. And sellers often accept offers below asking prices because completing transactions and moving on is priority over maximizing sale prices when market doesn't support valuations that sellers might wish properties commanded. The property taxes are very low, ranging from $800 to $1,800 annually for typical residential properties, and utility costs are reasonable through Manitoba Hydro's rates that haven't been fully privatized into profit-maximizing operations, creating total housing costs that remain well under $600 monthly, even including all expenses that home ownership requires for people who can perform basic maintenance themselves. The community has medical clinic with family doctors serving local population, school providing education for children, and basic services including grocery store and essential businesses. Though amenities are minimal and Brandon 45 minutes away serves as regional hub for shopping, healthcare specialists, and services that Village of 900 can't economically support through local tax base. Subscribe if you're realizing that affordable housing exists for people willing to leave markets where speculation destroyed connection between prices and local incomes, and comment which communities interest you most. Number 8. Smooth Rock Falls, Ontario, Northern Ontario, paper town, with houses under $70,000. Smooth Rock Falls sits in northeastern Ontario with about 1,200 people, paper mill heritage, and housing market where detached houses sell for $45,000 to $75,000, according to recent MLS data, creating affordability that allows home ownership with savings that wouldn't constitute first and last month's rent in Toronto, where two-bedroom apartments command $3,500 monthly, and landlords demand credit checks, employment verification, references, and sometimes bidding wars for privilege of renting. According to real estate listings, typical three-bedroom house in Smooth Rock Falls lists for $55,000 to $65,000, meaning mortgage payments are approximately $300 to $400 monthly with reasonable down payment, which is fraction of what any housing costs in Southern Ontario, where people spend 2/3 of income on shelter and still face overcrowding, long commutes, and general housing insecurity that permanent renting creates in markets where landlords have power and tenants have none. The affordability reflects Northern Ontario isolation, with Toronto being 7 hours away and nearest cities being significantly smaller, cold climate with winter temperatures regularly dropping to -35 and snow from October through April, forestry and paper industry decline destroying employment base that once supported middle-class community, and demographic challenges where population is aging and young people leave, creating decline that reduces services and economic vitality. The houses are predominantly older construction from mid-20th century forestry boom periods when worker housing and family residences were built quickly to accommodate expanding population, with quality being adequate but aesthetics dated, and many properties requiring updates that low values don't incentivize because spending $20,000 on renovations doesn't increase resale value proportionally when market is so depressed. According to local real estate patterns, properties frequently sell below asking prices as sellers prioritize completing transactions over maximizing proceeds, and some houses sit for sale for extended periods because demand is limited to people with specific reasons for living in Smooth Rock Falls rather than general buyers who have options and choose communities with better employment prospects and milder climates. The property taxes are moderate, ranging from $1,000 to $2,500 annually, and heating costs during long winters are elevated but manageable for people whose total housing costs remain under $700 monthly, including mortgage, taxes, insurance, and utilities, creating expense structure that's fraction of what renting equivalent space costs in any Southern Ontario city. Number 7, Quesnel, British Columbia, interior BC forestry town with houses under $200,000. Quesnel sits in central BC with about 10,000 people, forestry heritage and housing market where detached houses sell for $125,000 to $225,000, according to recent data, which is fraction of what equivalent properties cost in coastal BC, where Vancouver averages $1.8 million for detached houses, and Victoria averages $1.3 million, creating markets where homeownership requires exceptional incomes or generational wealth. According to real estate listings, typical 3-bedroom house in Quesnel lists for $160,000 to $190,000, meaning mortgage payments are approximately $900 to $1,100 monthly with 20% down, which is half or less of what renting equivalent space costs in Vancouver or Victoria, where 2-bedroom apartments command $2,500 to $3,000 monthly, creating a situation where owning in Quesnel costs less than renting in expensive BC cities. The affordability reflects interior BC location, creating cold winters with temperatures dropping to -30. Though summers are warm and pleasant, isolation from coastal population centers, with Vancouver being 7 hours away, forestry industry volatility creating economic uncertainty and employment challenges, and general perception that interior communities are less desirable than coastal locations, despite scenery being spectacular and outdoor recreation opportunities being excellent. The houses are a mix of older construction from forestry boom periods and some newer builds, with quality varying but many properties being well maintained and move-in ready, unlike fixer-uppers that northern Manitoba or Ontario markets often feature at bottom price ranges, creating housing stock that's dated but functional and livable without requiring immediate major repairs. According to local real estate dynamics, Quesnel market moves slowly with properties taking months to sell, and sellers often accepting offers below asking prices. But market is more functional than completely depressed northern towns, where properties can sit for years without generating interest, creating balance where affordability is excellent, but transactions do occur regularly, unlike ghost town markets where demand is essentially zero. The property taxes are moderate, ranging from $1,800 to $3,000 annually, and heating costs during winter are elevated. But BC interior climate is drier and often sunnier than coastal regions, where gray rain from October through May creates psychological depression that many find worse than cold, dry interior winter with sunshine and manageable snow. Number 6, Williams Lake, British Columbia, Caribou Region. Affordability under $250,000. Williams Lake sits in central BC with about 11,000 people and housing market, where detached houses sell for $140,000 to $240,000, according to recent listings, providing BC home ownership at prices that seem impossible to coastal residents accustomed to markets where condos exceed $600,000 and detached houses approach or exceed $2 million in desirable neighborhoods. According to real estate data, typical 3-bedroom house in Williams Lake lists for $170,000 to $210,000, meaning mortgage payments with 20% down are approximately $950 to $1,200 monthly, which is significantly less than renting equivalent space in any coastal BC city and creates ownership option that's actually more affordable than renting when accounting for equity building versus money disappearing to landlords. The affordability reflects Caribou interior location, creating 4-season climate with cold winters, though less extreme than northern BC, distance from coast with Vancouver being 5+ hours away, forestry and ranching economy that's experienced decline and volatility, and general perception among coastal residents that interior communities are somehow inferior, despite offering comparable outdoor recreation and arguably better weather than perpetual coastal rain and gray skies. The houses are a mix of ages and styles, with some older properties from ranching and forestry eras alongside newer construction from early 2000s boom periods, creating varied housing stock where buyers can choose between updating older character homes or purchasing relatively modern properties that don't require immediate work beyond cosmetic preferences. According to local market patterns, Williams Lake real estate moves moderately, with properties selling within few months typically, though market isn't competitive with bidding wars or situations where buyers must waive conditions and offer above asking, creating an environment where buyers have leverage to negotiate and conduct proper due diligence rather than making desperate offers driven by fear of missing out. Number 5. Tumbler Ridge, British Columbia, coal town with houses under $150,000. Tumbler Ridge sits in northeastern BC with about 2,500 people, coal mining heritage, and housing market where detached houses sell for $90,000 to $160,000 according to recent listings, providing mountain living at prices that are a fraction of what famous destinations charge, despite scenery including waterfalls and Rocky Mountain foothills that rival Banff aesthetically while offering isolation and affordability that tourism hasn't destroyed. According to real estate data, typical 3-bedroom house in Tumbler Ridge lists for $110,000 to $135,000, meaning mortgage payments with reasonable down payment are approximately $600 to $750 monthly, which is less than what studio apartments rent for in Vancouver, and provides home ownership with yard and mountain views for cost of cramped urban rental without natural amenities. The affordability reflects northeastern BC isolation accessible via highway, but being hours from major centers, coal mining industry volatility creating boom-bust economic cycles that affect employment stability and population retention, harsh climate with winter temperatures dropping to -35 or 40, and heavy snowfall requiring serious winter preparedness, and perception that coal towns are unstable communities rather than desirable destinations. The houses are a mix of 1980s original construction from town establishment, properties built during 2000s revival when coal mining resumed, and some newer builds, creating housing stock that ranges from dated but functional to relatively modern and well-maintained, depending on price point and seller situation, with foreclosures and motivated sellers creating opportunities for aggressive buyers. According to local market conditions, properties can sit for extended periods because buyer pool is limited to people with mining industry employment, retirees seeking affordable mountain living, remote workers who can live anywhere, or individuals specifically attracted to isolated northeastern BC lifestyle. A creating market where sellers often accept below asking offers just to complete transactions and move on. Number 4, Shaunavon, Saskatchewan, prairie town with houses under $80,000. West Saskatchewan with about 1,700 people and housing market where detached houses sell for $45,000 to $85,000 according to recent data, creating affordability that allows outright home ownership with savings that wouldn't constitute down payment in expensive markets where 20% of purchase price requires $150,000 cash that most Canadians don't possess. According to real estate listings, typical 3-bedroom house in Shaunavon lists for $55,000 to $70,000, meaning mortgage payments are approximately $300 to $400 monthly with reasonable down payment, which is less than what parking spots rent for in Toronto and fraction of what any housing costs in cities where studios exceed $1,800 monthly and one-bedrooms approach $2,500, creating rental markets that consume majority of income. The affordability reflects Southwest Saskatchewan isolation, with nearest cities being Regina 2 hours away and Swift Current 1 hour away, small population limiting services and employment, prairie climate with harsh winters dropping to -35, and hot summers with occasional severe weather, and general rural decline affecting small Saskatchewan communities as younger generation leaves for opportunities that agricultural economy no longer provides. The houses are typically older construction from early to mid-20th century when Shaunavon was prosperous agricultural service center, with quality varying, but many properties being maintained adequately and remaining livable, though aesthetics are dated and updates would improve comfort and efficiency, but aren't strictly necessary for basic habitation. According to local market dynamics, properties occasionally sit for extended periods because buyer pool is small, but transactions do occur regularly, unlike ghost town markets where demand is essentially zero, and sellers are often motivated to accept reasonable offers because completing sales and moving on is priority over extracting maximum prices from limited buyer market. The property taxes are very low, ranging from $800 to $1,600 annually for typical residential properties, and utility costs are minimal through Saskatchewan's cheap utilities that are among Canada's most affordable due to provincial crown corporations and political policies prioritizing rate stability over profit maximization. The community has Shaunavon Hospital providing emergency services and basic medical care, school serving local families, and essential services including grocery store and businesses covering daily needs, though amenities are limited and Swift Current for shopping and services that village can't economically support. Number 3, Elliot Lake, Ontario, retirement community with houses under $125,000. Elliot Lake sits in northern Ontario with about 11,000 people, deliberately marketed as retirement community and housing market where detached houses sell for $75,000 to $130,000 according to recent listings, creating affordability designed to attract retirees, selling expensive properties elsewhere, and seeking to stretch fixed incomes through reduced housing cost. According to real estate data, typical 3-bedroom house in Elliot Lake lists for $90,000 to $110,000, meaning mortgage payments are approximately $500 to $600 monthly with reasonable down payment, which is fraction of what any housing costs in southern Ontario, where equivalent properties exceed $600,000 and retirees are priced out of markets where they raised families. The affordability is deliberate municipal strategy following uranium mining collapse in 1990s when population crashed and town faced potential abandonment, prompting rebranding as retirement destination with marketing emphasizing affordable housing, healthcare access through hospital, recreation facilities, and lifestyle suitable for seniors seeking peace and nature without urban costs and chaos. The houses are a mix of original mining town construction from 1950s and 60s alongside some newer builds, with quality varying but many properties being well maintained by retiree owners who have resources for upkeep and value comfortable living during retirement years, creating housing stock that's generally adequate though not luxurious. According to local market patterns, properties sell steadily as retirees relocate from expensive regions, but market isn't competitive, allowing buyers to conduct proper due diligence and negotiate rather than making desperate offers. and some properties sit longer when sellers have unrealistic price expectations for community where values are deliberately kept low to attract retirees. The property taxes are moderate, ranging from $1,800 to $3,000 annually, and utility costs are elevated for Northern Ontario location, but manageable for retirees whose total housing costs, including mortgage, taxes, insurance, and utilities, remain well under $1,000 monthly compared to $5,500 that renting equivalent space costs in cities. Number 2, Thompson, Manitoba, Northern Manitoba City, with houses under $150,000. Thompson sits in northern Manitoba with about 14,000 people, nickel mining heritage, and housing market where detached houses sell for $90,000 to $160,000, according to recent data, providing northern city living at prices that are a fraction of what Winnipeg charges, despite Thompson having full urban services and amenities that smaller northern communities lack. According to real estate listings, typical 3-bedroom house in Thompson lists for $110,000 to $140,000, meaning mortgage payments are approximately $600 to $750 monthly with 20% down, which is less than what 1-bedroom apartments rent for in Winnipeg and provides home ownership with yard for cost of cramped urban rental. The affordability reflects northern Manitoba isolation, with Thompson being 7 hours from Winnipeg, harsh climate with winter temperatures dropping to -40 regularly, and long dark winters affecting mental health, mining industry volatility creating economic uncertainty, and general perception that northern living is hardship rather than desirable lifestyle, despite Thompson having services and amenities that isolation might suggest are absent. The houses are a mix of original mining company construction from 1950s and 60s alongside newer builds from subsequent decades, with quality varying, but many properties being solid structures that have been maintained adequately, though aesthetics may be dated and updates would improve comfort and energy efficiency. According to local market dynamics, Thompson real estate moves moderately, with properties selling within reasonable timeframes, typically, but market isn't competitive and buyers have leverage to negotiate and conduct inspections rather than making desperate offers, creating an environment where due diligence is possible and transactions proceed methodically. The property taxes are moderate, ranging from $2,000 to $3,500 annually, and heating costs during long harsh winters are elevated, but total housing costs remain far below what any comparable urban living costs in southern Manitoba, where Winnipeg houses exceed $300,000 and condos approach similar prices. The community has hospital providing comprehensive health care, unusual for northern community, school serving families, shopping including major retailers, and amenities functioning as regional hub, making Thompson more service-rich than smaller northern towns, while maintaining that larger southern cities destroyed through speculation and demand. Number 1, Pictou, Nova Scotia, maritime town with houses under $250,000. Pictou sits on Northumberland Strait in Nova Scotia with about 3,000 people, Scottish heritage, and housing market where detached houses sell for $175,000 to $260,000, according to recent listings, providing maritime coastal living at prices that are a fraction of what equivalent properties cost in popular destinations where waterfront commands million-plus prices. According to real estate data, typical 3-bedroom house in Pictou lists for $200,000 to $230,000, meaning mortgage payments are approximately $1,100 to $1,300 monthly with 20% down, which is less than what 1-bedroom apartments rent for in Halifax, and provides home ownership with potential ocean access for cost of urban rental without coastal amenities. The affordability reflects northern Nova Scotia location, creating maritime climate with damp winters, though temperatures rarely extreme, distance from Halifax being 2 hours away, small population limiting services and employment, and general maritime economic challenges where job opportunities are constrained and incomes are lower than national averages, creating region where housing remains affordable because demand doesn't exceed supply. The houses are a mix of historic properties from Scottish settlement periods alongside 20th century construction and some newer builds, with quality varying, but many properties having character and heritage features that expensive markets would command premiums for, but that Pictou buyers can acquire at reasonable prices without bidding wars or competition. According to local market patterns, Pictou real estate moves steadily, with properties selling within few months typically, and market is functional without being overheated, allowing buyers to negotiate and conduct inspections, creating an environment where transactions proceed rationally rather than emotionally driven by fear and competition. The property taxes are moderate, ranging from $2,000 to $3,500 annually, and maritime heating costs are elevated during winter, but Northumberland Strait location moderates temperature extremes compared to Atlantic coast exposure, creating living costs that remain reasonable for people whose total housing expenses are a fraction of what renting equivalent space costs in urban areas. The community has hospital in New Glasgow 10 minutes away, providing comprehensive healthcare, schools serving families, shopping adequate for daily needs, and services functioning with Scottish heritage, creating cultural identity through festivals and community events, providing social engagement. The employment situation reflects maritime economic challenges where opportunities are limited primarily to healthcare, education, services, and seasonal tourism, requiring working residents to commute to New Glasgow or other larger towns, work remotely if possible, or accept constrained career options that small community provides. Subscribe if you've learned that affordable home ownership still exists in Canadian communities that real estate industry ignores because low prices mean small commissions.